I was living in a McLeodganj, a Tibetan village where the Dalai Lama lives. There was a Canadian woman, or from Newfoundland, that was teaching yoga to the Western nuns and monks. So I thought I'd go and join. And that's when I started. So I'd have to walk an hour down the mountain to get to where the yoga class was. I was maybe 29. Then I ended up going down to the Institute in Pune just for a month. And in those days, to the Iyengar Institute, in those days you could just book in and go. Now you'd have to be with a studio and go with a teacher. It's much more political and who can get there. And so I went there for a month and ended up in Japan sometime later and started teaching there. The best way to learn anything is to teach. And I had no idea years ago in the mountains in India in this little cafe where all the astrologers would sit. I'm not an astrologer, but they'd all sit, oh yeah, teaching is so strong in your chart. I'd go, oh, come on. But it's what my calling was, and I had no idea in my late 20s. And ended up in Melbourne. And in those days in Melbourne, yoga was fringe. There was Swami Sarasvati that had her TV program. And there was a few of us that rented a warehouse in Melbourne, in Carlton, and we just took in turn to lead because we wanted to practice. So that's where I really started to learn to teach. And then I ended up moving up here. When I came to the Shire in those days, it was very different. Shops. There was no shop open after 6 o'clock in the evening. Winter was very, very quiet. It was almost too boring. A few teachers would be in halls here and there, but there were no yoga studios in those days. And I was working at the Buttery as a secretary, working in an office, and I started teaching Iyengar yoga at the Vision Studio, maybe 82, 83. So the Vision Dance Studio was a place that you could hire. Ginny had set this up as a dance studio and wanted to sublet. And I think I ended up having, there'd be 8 classes a week that I taught eventually. I might have run from there, geez, time goes, 8 or 10 years. And then I moved to my own studio above the Westpac Bank in Byron. There was 3 of us that said, yeah, let's move to this new space. And so I organised it all, and then they backed out. So I was left with this new venue. So I probably would have stayed where I was because it was fine. But in the meantime, change brings change. I'd had a child, and then there were more other studios opening up. So I just moved it to home, and with a young child, then I had another kid a few years later. So I made it more home.
High school students at Byron Bay have found a way to cope with stress from all that study. They've taken on a fresh subject, yoga.
Wednesday afternoon, and while most Byron Bay High School students are headed for the nearest sporting field, this group of around 30 are preparing for a 90-minute yoga session. It all looks peaceful enough, but according to instructor Jennifer Groves, anyone looking for a lazy afternoon is in the wrong place.
Sometimes it gets a little bit physically demanding, where I'm asking them to go to stretch and work quite hard.
The yoga session includes a number of stretching and breathing exercises which help the students relax.
I also, in those days, set yoga up in high schools in Mullumbimby High, Byron High and Ballina High, and was teaching in high schools. And in those days in Mullumbimby High, it was very much had to go through the P&C committee. The Christians wanted to know that it wasn't something that was going to be untoward for their Christian values. And then once it got through in Mullumbimby High, it got through in Byron High, then it got through Ballina High. So I had to go through all that, whereas today that wouldn't be an issue. And then just turn to your left or turn to your right. And are you turning from your eyes? Are you turning from your head? Are you turning from your pelvis? So I did Iyengar yoga, and I'm one of these people that have a very flexible body, and I got a lot of injuries and damages from yoga. Overstretching, ligament laxity, having kids older. And for some people, yoga is great, it fixes things. And so my inquiry became, well, if I'm doing this and I'm hurting myself, let's see what I can learn differently. And I came across Feldenkrais work, which is more neurological reprogramming of, rather than the muscles, it's the brain, and it's the plasticity of the brain to learn what you do. And I mixed it with yoga for quite some years, and that was very successful. But in that time there was more and more yoga teachers, and so I thought, well, there's so many yoga teachers, I'll just follow my path of learning somatic work. And I discovered Ruthie Alon's work, Bones for Life. Her programs have progressed under the banner of movement intelligence, and it just made so much sense to me. So that's what I do. There's a few other yoga teachers that have taught here that now teach in Europe, in Goa. I'm teaching in Taiwan. Looks like I'll be doing some work in China next year. If you would like to check out more about my work in movement intelligence, or if you're interested in a private lesson or workshops or trainings, please go to my website.